Chapter 1: The Man at My Door. The storm was relentless. Rain lashed against the windows in sheets, and the wind howled through the trees lining the edge of my property. The ocean beyond the cliffs roared, waves crashing angrily as if mourning the same loss I had been for the past 3 years. I was used to storms. They came and went like clockwork on this part of the coast, but tonight, something about the air felt different. Heavier. Charged. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, curled up on the couch with a half-finished book in my lap, but I hadn't turned a page in over an hour. My eyes kept straying to the photograph on the fireplace mantel. Henry. His smiling face was frozen in time, the way I remembered him best. His arm was slung around me, his dark hair tousled by the ocean breeze, his hazel eyes alight with laughter. That photo was taken just a week before he disappeared, before the sea swallowed him whole and never gave him back. A sharp knock jolted me from my thoughts. I frowned, glancing at the clock on the wall. 11:43 p.m. Who would be visiting me at this hour, in this weather? Another knock, louder this time. Urgent. My heartbeat quickened as I stood, my fingers tightening around the edges of my blanket. I moved toward the door cautiously, hesitating before unlocking it. The moment I pulled it open, my breath caught in my throat. A man stood on my doorstep, drenched from head to toe. Rainwater dripped from his dark hair, soaking through his thin, tattered clothes. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, his hands clenched at his sides as if he had been bracing himself for this moment. But it wasn't just any man. It was him, Henry. My heart stopped. My vision blurred at the edges. "No," I whispered. This isn't possible." I stumbled back a step, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. My mind scrambled for an explanation, a trick, a hallucination, a cruel joke. But there he was, standing right in front of me, looking just as he had 3 years ago. He blinked at me, his brows drawing together. "Please," he rasped, his voice hoarse. I don't know where else to go." A wave of ice crawled through my veins. He didn't sound like Henry. His voice was similar, but there was a hesitation, an uncertainty that had never been in my husband's tone. And then there was his expression, confused, searching, as if he was looking at a stranger. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering against my ribs. "Henry?" His frown deepened. "No," he said slowly. "I don't think so." I clutched the doorframe to keep myself upright. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. "You." My voice cracked. "You look exactly like my husband." His eyes flickered with something. Hesitation, wariness, something I couldn't name. He exhaled shakily and ran a trembling hand through his wet hair. "I don't remember anything," he admitted. "I woke up in the water. I don't know who I am." My stomach clenched. No, this wasn't real. It had to be some kind of sick trick, a terrible coincidence. But my instincts screamed otherwise. This was Henry, or someone who looked so much like him that it shattered the boundaries of reality. My voice was barely above a whisper. "I think you should come inside." He hesitated. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the uncertainty tightening his jaw. But the rain kept pouring, and he was shivering violently. After a moment, he stepped inside. I shut the door behind him, my hands shaking. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken words. The scent of salt water and rain clung to him, mixing with something else, something faintly metallic. He looked around hesitantly, taking in the cozy living room, the framed photos on the walls, the remnants of a life that should have been his. He faltered, his fingers twitching at his sides. "I don't know why, but this place, it feels familiar." My chest ached. My hands curled into fists at my sides. If this was some cruel trick of fate, I didn't know if I had the strength to survive it. I forced myself to meet his eyes, the same hazel ones I had once loved so deeply. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely steady, his lips parted. "I wish I knew." And just like that, my world came undone all over again. Chapter 2: A Stranger in My Husband's Skin. The sound of rain against the windows filled the heavy silence between us. He stood there, dripping water onto my hardwood floors, his breath uneven, his hands clenched as if he were struggling to hold himself together. I couldn't stop staring at him. Every inch of him was Henry. His sharp jawline, the faint scar on his left eyebrow from a childhood accident, the way his dark hair curled at the ends when wet. His broad shoulders, the same ones I used to lean on. Even the way his lips parted slightly as he tried to find words. God, I knew that expression. And yet, I didn't recognize the man standing before me. He was Henry in body, but the soul inside him was different. I forced myself to breathe. My fingers dug into the sleeves of my sweater as I tried to suppress the nausea rising in my stomach. He claimed not to remember anything. But how was that possible? If he had survived the accident, if the ocean had spared him after all these years, where had he been? Why hadn't he come home? And if he truly had no memory of who he was, then who had he become? His gaze flickered to me, hesitant, unsure. He swallowed hard. I don't know what's happening. I swear I'm not lying. I don't remember anything before waking up in the water. The sincerity in his voice was unsettling. If this were a cruel joke, his confusion was too convincing. I exhaled shakily and turned toward the hallway. You need dry clothes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't wait for a response. I moved quickly, forcing my legs to carry me down the hall to my bedroom. My hands trembled as I yanked open Henry's old dresser, the one I could never bring myself to get rid of. His scent had faded from the fabric long ago, but the memories were still woven into every thread. I grabbed a sweatshirt and a pair of sweatpants, then hesitated. These belonged to my husband. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second before steeling myself and walking back to the living room. Here, I said, handing them to him. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. You should change. He hesitated before nodding. His fingers brushed mine as he took the clothes, and I flinched at the warmth of his touch. He noticed. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't respond. I turned away instead, giving him space to change while I tried to quiet the storm raging inside me. I stared out the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed, pale, lost. What was I supposed to do now? A rustling of fabric behind me signaled that he had finished changing. I turned slowly, my throat tightening at the sight of him standing there in Henry's old sweatshirt. It fit him perfectly. He shifted uncomfortably under my stare. Thank you. The words felt too formal, too distant. Henry never would have thanked me for something so simple. But he wasn't Henry. I folded my arms over my chest, trying to steady myself. You need to tell me everything, I said, from the moment you woke up in the water. He exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. I don't know much, he admitted. I remember cold, darkness. Then I woke up. The tide had pulled me onto the shore. My clothes were soaked, I was shivering, and my head felt like it was splitting in half. He paused. I should have gone to a hospital, but something told me to keep walking. Like I had to find something. Or someone. His hazel eyes met mine, searching. I didn't know where I was going, but my feet carried me here. A shiver crawled down my spine. Something about his words felt too right. You don't remember anything before that? I pressed. No flashes of memory? No names? He shook his head. Nothing. Just, he hesitated. This house. My pulse pounded in my ears. What do you mean? He exhaled. I don't know how, but when I saw this place, it felt familiar, like I had been here before. My hands curled into fists. You have been here before, I whispered. This was your home. He inhaled sharply, his fingers twitching. I want to believe that, he said softly, but I don't feel like your husband. I flinched at the words, at the finality of them. He didn't feel like my husband. I swallowed hard and forced myself to focus. If he truly had no memories, I needed proof of who he was. I need to make a call, I murmured. He stiffened. Who? A doctor, I said, already reaching for my phone. You need to be examined. If you hit your head, maybe there's an explanation for all of this. He didn't argue. He only nodded, as if part of him wanted answers just as badly as I did. But as I dialed the number, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Because whether or not this man remembered his past, I knew, deep in my bones, that Henry had come home. Chapter 3. Unraveling the Past. The quiet hum of the ceiling fan filled the space between us as I hung up the phone. The doctor would see him first thing in the morning. Until then, I had no idea what to do with the man who wore my husband's face but carried none of his memories. He sat on the couch, his hands clasped together, his gaze fixed on the floor. His wet clothes were now in a pile near the fireplace, and the warmth of the room had stopped his shivering, but he still looked lost. Haunted. I didn't know what scared me more, the possibility that he was Henry, or the chance that he wasn't. I took a slow breath and sat across from him, gripping a mug of tea between my hands. The warmth did little to settle the cold dread in my stomach. We need to start somewhere, I said carefully. You don't remember your name. You don't remember anything about your past. But maybe we can jog something. His jaw tightened. How? I hesitated before rising from my seat. My heart pounded as I walked toward the bookshelf by the fireplace. A single photo frame sat there, untouched for years. I picked it up and stared at the image of Henry and me on our wedding day, his arm wrapped around my waist, my laughter caught in time. I turned the frame toward him. Do you recognize this? He took it with careful hands, his brows furrowing as he studied the picture. Seconds passed, then a full minute. I held my breath, waiting for something, anything, to flicker across his face. A spark of familiarity, a crack in the empty space where his memories should be. But there was nothing. He exhaled sharply and shook his head. I'm sorry, he murmured, setting the frame on the table. Disappointment curled in my chest. I swallowed hard, pressing forward. Your name is Henry Carter, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You were a marine biologist. You loved the ocean more than anything. I forced out a tight smile. You used to say the sea was in your blood. His fingers twitched at that. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Something fleeting, almost imperceptible, before it was gone again. I don't remember, he admitted, but there was hesitation now, like part of him wanted to. I pressed on. You went missing 3 years ago. Your boat was found wrecked off the coast, but they never found your body. My throat tightened. They said the currents were too strong, that you had been... I stopped myself. I couldn't say the word. Dead. But here he was, alive. He ran a hand over his face. I don't understand, he murmured. If that's true, where have I been? How did I survive? I don't know. My voice was soft, but maybe the doctor will have answers. Silence settled between us, thick with unspoken fears. I studied him, the way his body tensed, the way his eyes flickered with frustration. I need air, he muttered suddenly, pushing off the couch. I rose with him, alarm sparking in my chest. Where are you going? Not far, he said, already heading for the door. Just outside. I hesitated before following him out onto the porch. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the scent of salt and damp earth. The ocean roared in the distance, waves crashing against the shore. He stood at the edge of the porch, his gaze locked on the dark waters beyond the cliffs. A strange sort of stillness settled over him. I crossed my arms against the cold. Does it feel familiar? He didn't answer right away, but then after a long moment he exhaled. Yes, he admitted, but not in the way I expected. I frowned. What do you mean? He turned to me, his expression unreadable. It's like, I know the ocean. I can feel it calling to me, but it's not a memory. It's just a pull, a knowing. A shiver ran down my spine. A pull, my mind raced. Could trauma block out an entire past life? Could something deeper, something unexplainable, be at play? I clenched my hands at my sides, grounding myself in reality. We'll figure this out, I said firmly. We'll find out who you are. He held my gaze for a long moment, and then, with quiet certainty, he whispered, I just hope I like who I was. A lump formed in my throat, because deep down I wasn't sure if I wanted him to remember. Because if he did, it might mean losing him all over again. Chapter 4. The Truth Beneath the Waves. The morning came slowly, dragging a thick fog over the cliffs and settling a cold weight in my chest. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind conjured impossible scenarios. Henry, or whoever he was, had slept on the couch, though I doubted he got any more rest than I did. I stood by the kitchen window, staring at the gray waves that crashed against the shore. They seemed different today, almost watchful. A cup of coffee sat untouched in my hands when I heard him stir. I turned, catching sight of him as he shifted upright, his bare chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. He had slept in a pair of old sweatpants I found for him, the ones Henry used to wear. They fit him perfectly. He rubbed a hand over his face before looking at me. Morning. His voice was low, hoarse from sleep, and for a second it almost felt normal, like waking up to my husband again. But the moment shattered when I remembered he didn't know me. I forced a breath and set the coffee down. We should get going soon. The doctor's office is in town. He nodded and stretched before standing. He moved like Henry, even down to the way he ran a hand through his hair as he yawned. My stomach twisted painfully. What if the doctor finds nothing? What if I never get an answer? The drive into town was quiet. The rhythmic sound of tires against wet pavement filled the silence between us. He stared out the window, watching the ocean as if drawn to it. The way his fingers tapped absently against his knee told me he was deep in thought. "What if I don't like what we find?" he asked suddenly. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "What do you mean?" He turned to me, eyes dark with something unreadable. "What if I wasn't a good person? What if I was someone I don't want to be?" My throat tightened. "Henry was a good man," I whispered. His gaze lingered on me, searching for something. "And if I'm not him?" I had no answer. Dr. Whitmore was an older man with silver hair and a keen gaze. He'd been my family doctor for years, and when I called him about Henry, or the man who looked like him, he agreed to see us immediately. The small office smelled of antiseptic and paper, a comforting scent of routine and logic. I clung to that. The examination was straightforward. The doctor checked his vitals, reflexes, even ran a few cognitive tests. When the blood work and scans were done, we sat in his office, waiting for answers. Whitmore adjusted his glasses as he studied the preliminary results. "Well," he said finally, "this is remarkable." I leaned forward. "What is it?" The doctor exhaled. "His vitals are perfect. No signs of injury or long-term trauma. But here's what's strange. His medical records are identical to Henry's." My pulse spiked. "Identical?" "Yes," Whitmore said slowly. "Blood type, old fractures, even the scar on his left shoulder from that childhood fall." He glanced at me over his glasses. "Everything matches Alice?" I swallowed hard. My body wanted to believe it. He is Henry. He has to be. But then Whitmore continued, "There's one inconsistency." The air in the room seemed to still. "What?" I asked, barely above a whisper. The doctor turned the screen toward us, pointing at something in the test results. "His DNA." He hesitated, as if struggling to put it into words. "It's not just a match to Henry, it's an exact copy." My brow furrowed. "I don't understand." He sighed. "Even identical twins have some genetic variation, but this, it's like a perfect replica, as if he was created from the same blueprint." A chill ran through me. "That's not possible," I said weakly. Whitmore gave me a grave look, and yet here we are. The room felt too small, too suffocating. I turned to Henry, or the man in his skin, but he was just as stunned, his hands curled into fists on his lap. "Then what does that mean?" The doctor sighed. "I don't know." A heavy silence fell between us. I stood abruptly. "I need air." Without waiting for a response, I rushed out of the office, my heart hammering in my chest. The salty breeze hit me the moment I stepped outside, but it did nothing to settle the storm inside me. How could this be happening? If he was Henry, why didn't he remember? And if he wasn't, then what was he? A moment later, he appeared beside me. His expression was unreadable, his hands stuffed into his pockets. "I don't understand any of this," he admitted. Neither did I. But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I saw something behind his confusion, a shadow of pain, fear. "I don't either," I said softly, "but I promise we'll find out." His jaw clenched. "What if I don't want to?" I hesitated. "Why wouldn't you?" His eyes darkened. He turned to face the ocean, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I have a feeling that whatever happened to me, it wasn't natural." A shiver ran down my spine. Because deep down, I feared the same thing. Something had brought him back, something unnatural, and whatever it wasn't finished with him yet. Chapter 5, The Forgotten Betrayal. Henry stared at the old photograph, his jaw tight. It was a picture of us, him and me, taken years ago on the docks. The sun had been setting behind us, turning the sky into streaks of gold and crimson. His arm was wrapped around me, his lips at my temple, caught mid-laughter. We had looked happy, in love. But now Henry held the picture like it was a foreign object, something distant, unfamiliar. "I don't remember this," he said finally, his voice rough. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I know." We had spent the last few days piecing things together, his past, his identity, his missing years, but the gaps in his memory were still as deep as the ocean. And I was starting to wonder if some of them were intentional. What if I don't want to remember? His voice was quiet, but there was something sharp beneath it. I stiffened. "What do you mean?" He set the photo down, rubbing his hands over his face. "Maybe there's a reason I forgot. Maybe there's something I shouldn't remember." A chill crawled down my spine. "What are you saying?" Henry exhaled, turning his gaze to the stormy sea outside. "I've been having flashes, images, but they don't feel like memories. They feel like warnings." I felt my pulse quicken. "What kind of warnings?" He hesitated. Then quietly he said, "You." The word hit me like a slap. I took a step back, my throat tightening. Me? Henry ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every tense line of his body. I don't know how to explain it, but every time I try to remember, it's like I get this overwhelming sense that we were tangled in something dangerous. His gaze darkened. Something I should have stayed away from. My stomach twisted. He didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. Somewhere in his lost memories, I was part of the reason he disappeared. I felt the floor shift beneath me. You think I had something to do with your accident? No, he said immediately, his expression flickering with guilt. That's not what I meant. Then what do you mean, Henry? My voice was sharper than I intended, because you're standing here, alive, after 3 years of being presumed dead. And now you're telling me you don't just not remember me, but that you feel like I was part of the reason you vanished? I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Do you have any idea what it was like for me? To lose you? To think you drowned out there, alone? My voice cracked, but I refused to let the tears fall. And now you're suggesting I might have had a hand in it? His expression softened, and for a moment I thought he might reach for me. But he didn't. Instead, he said something worse. I don't know who to trust, Alice. The words sliced through me. I recoiled, the air leaving my lungs. 3 years of grief. 3 years of missing him. And now, when I finally had him back, he wasn't just lost in his memories, he was lost in us. I turned away before he could see the tears welling in my eyes. I need some air. I didn't wait for a response. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, the cold wind biting at my skin. I didn't know what was worse, losing Henry once or watching him look at me like I was a stranger. Or worse, like I was a threat. I walked along the shoreline, my thoughts a chaotic mess. Something was wrong. Henry's memories weren't just missing, they were buried, deliberately, and someone had buried them deep. But why? I pulled my coat tighter around me, my boots sinking into the wet sand. The waves crashed violently against the rocks, as if they, too, held secrets they refused to give up. And then a movement caught my eye, a shadow standing near the abandoned dock, half hidden in the mist. My heart pounded. Hello, I called, my voice swallowed by the wind. The figure didn't move, but I felt it, a presence, a watching, waiting presence. Someone knew about Henry, about his return, and about what really happened 3 years ago. I took a slow step forward, but before I could get any closer, the shadow vanished, leaving only the cold wind and the sound of the relentless sea. When I returned to the house, Henry was pacing near the fireplace, his expression unreadable. I hesitated in the doorway. Henry. Before I could finish, he turned to me, his jaw tight. I remember something. The room went still. I swallowed. What? His throat worked as he struggled for the words. A fight. The night I disappeared, his hands curled into fists, with someone I trusted. A shiver ran through me. His voice dropped lower, haunted, and I think I was betrayed. And that concludes part 1 of My Husband Went Missing at Sea, then a man who looks just like him showed up at my door. Alice has uncovered shocking truths, but the mystery is far from over. Who is Henry now? What really happened that night on the boat? And can love survive when the past refuses to stay buried? Get ready for part 2, where secrets will unravel, emotions will run deep, and the ultimate choice between love and the truth will be made. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Part 2 is coming soon.